Wait, hold on real quick. Okay, you're good. Go ahead.
Good now.
Yeah.
Right. So we did our project on the edible animal cells. The target age was 7th and 8th graders. Yeah. We're going to use the cookie. So to help the students relate, we're going to use this edible cookie. And then the students are going to put all the different types of, like the ribosome, the nucleus, and use different types of candy to represent each thing. And we thought that by, allowing them to get hands-on, help retention of the information.
So basically the objectives of our lesson plan are going to be that, so given a labeled diagram of both a plant and animal, well, in this case just an animal cell, and the supplies needed for their activity, the students will be able to create a model of an animal cell using the different types of candies and food materials that we have set out for them. And they'll be able to include all the labeled parts of the cell that are included on that diagram. And also, at the end of a presentation, and given the diagram of the cell, the students will also be able to label the parts of the animal cell with 100% accuracy on a worksheet. So the teaching standards that this is going to cover are it's a science standard. It says explain that all living organisms are composed of one cell or multiple cells, and that the many functions needed to sustain life are carried out within these cells. So to describe this, we decided to implement the online software called Prezi. So this is going to help us get the ideas across to the students. So we created Prezi to describe the parts of an animal cell and explain them to the students. So we thought this would be a good way to get them engaged because it's a little more interactive than a PowerPoint. That's a little bit more visually interesting. So we'll start with an introduction and explain to the students that all organisms are made of one or more cells. We can describe the two different types of cells, the plant and animal, but in this case we'll focus on the animal cell. And that each cell contains various organelles that carry out the functions necessary for life, so that's going to cover the science standard. And then as we go, we have a diagram of an animal cell with all the labeled parts. So one by one, the teacher will walk the students through the presentation. It'll focus on one organelle at a time, and then move to a definition of that part. It goes through all 8 parts that we have labeled then. So satisfied.
It doesn't stupid. Literally, it puts the line going down. That might be a little more tactical.
Pretty interesting for the students to look at, so hopefully that'll keep them more engaged in the lesson.
Very interactive software that allows them to more or less play around with and interact with the lesson itself. So instead of using something like a PowerPoint where you have just slides that the teacher will go through, instead what you have is a more interactable experience with the project itself other than the creation of the cell itself.
If you keep going over stuff, the more you go over it, the more it's going to, we're going to get it a lot better.
Yeah, some things that we learned about the Prezi software are that it's used, it can be used on a desktop or an iPad, so it's like you can take it anywhere, and it's useful in different locations and settings for the students. And it's used for education and business both. It allows for collaboration, so people can work on the same presentation if they put it together. So a lot of businesses have used it for their presentations as well, which is pretty good.
And then the second one is that they use 11 batteries to be able to identify different steps in the
So, kind of what we did And when we were creating this project, figuring out what we wanted to do, we both, when researching the articles that we need to make for this project, instead was we use what we found to implement into our project right now. So the project I found, or the article I found more or less, was an article that went over how a doctor and a physicist had a son that instead he decided to send him through, instead of a really academically structured high school, that he went through an arts and crafts school, and instead, like, what his son ended up becoming having was a Nobel Peace Prize in physics, because he was able to construct the tools and the apparatuses needed for all of his for both his projects and also his tools in the physics field. So basically, what I did with what I got from that article was basically what we have is students that have more of a hands-on experience with a project rather than just